Hi, everybody. Let's try this for a third time. I apologize. My last opening actually turned out really well, but instead of pressing pause, I pressed stop, and I'm not good enough at my editing yet to get everything put together. Very sorry about that. I need to get better software. I just need to learn. I need to take some time to sit down and learn. However, you know what? I'm just gonna I'm going to get into the book almost right away. I just want to give a quick apology for the time frame between books. It's totally my fault. I know said I was going to do Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. I'm just not feeling those books right now. I really do need to do something a little bit more adult. I want to the book I'm going to be doing today. This is one that I read when I was young. I loved it. Uh, I want to bring this joy to one of my family members who hasn't had the opportunity to read the books yet, and anyone else who actually wants to sit down and enjoy with me. I appreciate you all. Don't have a whole lot to say. I'm sorry. So I'm going to start with the back of the book, and then we'll start with then we'll get on going. Today we are reading Anne McCaffrey's Dragonsong. Yeah, Dragonsong. Part of part of the Harper Hall series. It's a trilogy of books. This book was released in 1976. It actually came out 3 years before I was born. I love this series. I always have. And I hope I can bring that joy to all of you. So, more than anything, Melanie wants to become a harper so she can create music. But women aren't allowed to play instruments in the world of Pern. Forbidden to pursue her dreams, Melanie runs away and discovers something miraculous. She befriends a hatch of fire lizards, a rare species of miniature dragons, and teaches them to sing with her. Meanwhile, Pern is threatened by a centuries-old force known as Thread. Only dragons are able to protect Pern from the mysterious danger, and there are fewer and fewer in existence. Unaware of the danger, the fire lizards grow and begin to act like dragons they so closely resemble. Melanie begins to wonder, could her new friends be the key to saving her world? Quickly, before I start reading more, I just want to apologize for the sound quality on this particular video. It was completely dead, so I have to have it on the charger instead of having the good mic plugged in. I promise I'll have it done properly by the next time. All right, so Dragonsong by Anne McCaffrey. Forward. Ruckbat in the Sagittarian sector was a golden G-type star. It had 5 planets, 2 asteroid belts, and a stray planet it had attracted and held in recent millennia. When men first settled on Ruckbat's third world and called it Pern, they had taken little notice of the stranger planet, swinging about in its adopted primary in a wildly erratic elliptical orbit. For 2 generations, the colonists gave the bright red star little thought, until the path of the wanderer brought it close to its stepsister at perihelion. When the spore life, which proliferated at an incredible rate on the red star's wild surface, spun off into space and bridged the gap to Pern, the spores fell as thin threads on the temperature-hospitable planet and devoured anything organic in their way, seeking to establish burrows in Pern's warm earth from which to set out more voracious threads. The colonists suffered staggering losses in terms of people scored to death, and in crops and vegetation wiped out completely. Only fire killed thread on land. Only stone and metal stopped its progress. Fortunately, it drowned in water, but the colonists could scarcely live on the seas. The resourceful men cannibalized their transport ships and, abandoning the open southern continent where they had touched down, set about making the natural caves in the northern continent habitable. They evolved a two-phase plan to combat thread. The first phase involved breeding a highly specialized variety of life form indigenous to their new world. The dragons, named for the mythical Tyrian beast they resembled, had two extremely useful characteristics. They could get from one place to another instantly by teleportation, and when they had chewed a phosphorine-bearing rock, they could emit a flaming gas. Thus, the flying dragons could char thread to ash mid-air and escape its ravages themselves. The men and women with high empathy ratings or some innate telepathic ability were trained to use and preserve these unusual animals, partnering them in a lifelong and intimate relationship. The original cave fort, constructed in the eastern face of the Great West Mountain Range, soon became too small to hold either the colonists or the great dragons. Another settlement was started slightly to the north by a great lake, conveniently nestled near a cave-filled cliff, where the hold, too, became overcrowded in a few generations. Hi! Miss Skitter is greeting us. Since the red star rose in the east, it was decided to start a holding in the eastern mountains, provided suitable accommodations to be found. The ancient cave-pocketed cones of ancient volcanoes in the Brendan Mountains proved so suitable to the dragon men and women that they searched and found several more throughout Pern, and left Fort Hold and Ruthia Hold for the pastoral colonists, the holders. How? Oh. Hi. Somebody needs attention. Here we go. Hello, everybody. This is Miss Skitter. She's my little old lady. I called you old, because you are. But you're mine. Hello. Oh, she's giving a mighty roar for us all. Okay. However, such projects took the last of the fuel for the great stone cutters, originally thought to be used for the most diffident mining, since Pern was a light on metals, and any subsequent folds and wares were hand-hewn. The dragons and the riders and the wares and the people in the cave holdings went about their separate tasks, and each developed habits that became custom, which solidified into tradition, and then as incontrovertible incontrovertible as law. By the third pass of the Red Star, the complicated social, political, and economic structure had developed to deal with the recurrent evil of thread. There were now 6 wares pledged to protect all Pern, each ware having a geographical section of the northern continent literally under its wings. The rest of the population, the holds, agreed to tithe to support the wares, since those fighters, these dragon men, did not have any arable land in their volcanic homes, nor did they have time for farming while protecting the planet from passes of the thread. Holds developed whatever natural caves could be found. Some, of course, were extensive or strategically placed near good water and grazing. Others were smaller and less well placed. It took a strong man to keep a frantic, terrified people in control in the holds during the threat attacks. It took wise administration to conserve food supplies for times when nothing could be safely grown. Extraordinary measures controlled population, keeping its number healthy and useful until such a time as thread should pass. And often children from one hold were raised in another hold to spread the genetic pool and keep the holds from dangerous inbreeding. Such practice was called fostering and was used in both hold and craft halls, where special skills such as metalworking, animal breeding, farming, fishing, and mining, such as there was, were preserved, so that one lord holder could not deny the products of a craft hall situated in his hold to others. The crafts were decreed independent of a hold's affiliation, each craft master at a hall owing allegiance only to the master of that particular craft, who, as the need arose, took likely students in as fosterlings. Except for the return of the Red Star approximately every 200 years, life was pleasant on Pern. There came a time when the Red Star, due to the conjunction of Rukbar's 5 natural satellites, did not pass close enough to Pern to drop the dreadful spores, and the Pernese forgot about the danger. The people prospered, spreading out across the rich land, carving more holds out of rock, and becoming so busy with their pursuits that they did not realize that there were only a few dragons in the skies, and only one ware of dragon riders left on Pern. In a few generations, the descendants of the holders began to wonder if the Red Star would ever return. The dragon riders fell into disfavor. Why should all of Pern support these people and their hungry beasts? The legends of past braveries and the very reason for such courage became dishonored. In the natural course of events, the Red Star again spun close to Pern, winking with a baleful red eye on its intended victims. One man, Flar, a rider of the bronze dragon Memenith, believed that the ancient tales had truth in them. His half-brother, Fënor, rider of Brown Kenneth, listened to his arguments and came to believe. When the last golden egg of a dying queen dragon lay hardening on the Brandon Weir hatching ground, Flar and Fënor seized the opportunity to gain control of the Weir. Searching Ruthia Hold, they found a strong woman, Lessa, the only surviving member of the proud bloodline of Ruthia Hold. She impressed young Rameth, the new queen, and became werewoman of the Brandon Weir, and Flanor's bronze Mananeth became the new queen's mate. The three young riders, Flair, Fënor, and Lessa, forced the lord holders and the craftsmen to recognize their imminent danger and prepare the almost defenseless planet against threat. But it was distressingly obvious that the scant 200 dragons of Brandon Weir could not defend the widespread and sprawling settlements. 6 full weirs had been needed in the olden days when the settled land had become much less extensive. In learning to direct her queen between one place and another, Lessa discovered that dragons could teleport between times as well. Risking her life as well as Pern's only queen, Lessa and Ramoth went back in time 400 turns to the days before the mysterious disappearance of the other 5 weirs. Just after the last pass of the Red Star had been completed, the 5 weirs, seeing only the decline of their prestige and bored with the inactivity after a lifetime of exciting combat, agreed to help Lessa and Pern and came forward to her time. Dragonsong between 7 turns after the 5 weirs came forward. Dragonsong begins 7 turns, so 7 years after the 5 weirs came forward. Chapter 1. Drummer beat and piper blow. Sorry, I am having a rough time with words today. Drummer beat and piper blow. Harper strike and soldier go. Free the flame and sear the grasses till the dawning red star passes. Almost as if the elements too mourned the death of the gentle old harper at southeaster blue for 3 days, locking even the burial barge in the safety of the dock cavern. The storm gave sea-holder Yamath too much time to brood over his dilemma. It gave him time to speak to every man who could keep rhythm and pitch, and they all gave him the same answer. They couldn't properly honor the old harper with his death song, but Melanie could. To which answer Yarnus would gruff and stomp off. It rankled his mind that he couldn't give voice to his dissatisfaction with that answer and his frustration. Melanie was only a girl, too tall and lanky to be a proper girl at that. It galled him to have to admit that, unfortunately, she was the only person in the entire half-circle Seahold who could play any instrument as well as the old harper. Her voice was true her fingers clever on strings, stick or pipe, and she knew the death song. For all Yanis could be certain, the aggravating child had been practicing that song ever since old Petron started burning with his fatal fever. She will have to do the honor, Yarnus, his wife Mavi told him the evening the storm began to slacken. The important thing is that Petron is properly sung to rest. One does not have to record who did the singing. The old man knew he was dying. Why didn't he instruct one of the men? Because, replied Mavi with a touch of sharpness in her voice, you would never spare him a man when there was fishing. There was young Trinity, whom you sent fostering to Issa's sea hold. Couldn't that young lad of Feroltz? His voice is changing. Come, Yarnus, it'll have to be mentally. Yarnus grumbled bitterly against the inevitable as he climbed into the sleeping firs. That's what everyone else has told you, haven't they? So why make so much of a necessity? Yarnus settled himself, resigned. The fishing will be good tomorrow, his wife said, yawning. She preferred him fishing to stomping around the hold, sullen and critical with enforcing inactivity. She knew he was the finest sea holder Half Circle had ever had. The hold was prospering, with plenty for bartering set by in the storage caves. They hadn't lost a ship or a man in several turns either, which said much for his weather wisdom. But Yarnus, at home on a heaving deck in the foul weather, was very much adrift when taxed with the unexpected on land. Mavi was keenly aware that Yarnus was displeased with his youngest child. Mavi found the girl exasperating too. Mentally worked hard and was very clever with her fingers. Too clever by half when it came to playing any instrument to the harper craft. Perhaps Mavi thought she had not been wise to permit the girl to linger in the old harper's constant company once she learned all the proper teaching songs. But it had been one less worry to let mentally nurse the old harper, and Petron had wished it. No one begrudged a harper's requests. Oh, well, thought Mavi, dismissing the past. There'd be a new harper soon, and mentally could be put to tasks proper to a young girl. The next morning, the storm had cleared off, and the skies were cloudless, the seas calm. The burial barge had been outfitted in the dock cavern, Petron's body wrapped in harper blue on the tiller board. The entire fleet and most of the Seahold followed in the wake of the oar-driven barge out into the faster-moving current above the Nereep Deep. Melanie on the barge prow sang the elegy, her clear, strong voice carrying back to the half-circle fleet, the men chanting the descant as they rowed the barge. On the final chord, Petron went to his rest. Mentally bowed her head and let the drum and stick slide from her fingers into the sea. How could she ever use them again when they had beaten Petron's last song? She held back her tears since the harper had died because she knew she had to be able to sing his elegy and you couldn't sing with a throat closed from crying. Now the tears ran down her cheeks, mingled with sea spray. Her sobs punctuated the soft chant of the steersman setting about. Petteron had been her friend, her ally, and mentor. She had sung from the heart as he taught her, from the heart and the gut. Had he heard her song where he had gone? She raised her eyes to the palisades of the coast, to the white sanded harbor between the two arms of the half-circle hold. The sky had wept itself out in the past 3 days, a fitting tribute. And the air was cold. She shivered in her thick ware-hide jacket. She would have some protection from the wind if she stepped down into the cockpit with the oarsmen, but she couldn't move. Honor always accompanied by responsibility, and it was fitting for her to remain where she was until the burial barge touched the stones of the dock cavern. Half-circle hold would be lonelier than ever for her now. Petteron had tried so hard to live enough for his replacement to arrive. He told mentally he wouldn't last the winter. He'd dispatched a message to the Master Harper Robinson to send a new harper as soon as possible. He'd also told mentally that he'd sent 2 of her songs to the Master Harper. "Women can't be harpers," she said to Petteron, astonished and awed. "1 in 100 have perfect pitch," Petteron had said in one of his excessive replies. 1 in 10,000 can build an acceptable melody with meaningful words. Were you only a lad, there'd be no problem at all. Well, you're stuck with me being a girl. You'd make such a fine, big, strong lad, you would," Petteron had replied exasperately. "And what's wrong with being a fine, big, strong girl?" Mentally had been half teasing, half annoyed. "Nothing, surely nothing," and Petteron had patted her on the hands, smiling up at her. She'd been helping him eat his dinner, his hands so crippled, even the lightest wooden spoon left terrible ridges in the swollen fingers. "And Master Harper Robinson's a fair man. No one on Pern can say he isn't. And he'll listen to me. He knows his duty, and I am, after all, a senior member of the craft hall, and being taught up in the craft before him himself, and I'll require him to listen to you." "Have you really sent him those songs you made me wax down on slates?" "I have. Sure I have done that much for you, dear child." He'd been so empathetic that Melanie had to believe that he had done what he said. Poor old Petteron, in the last months he had not remembered the time of turn, much less what he had done the day before. He was timeless now, mentally told herself, her wet cheeks stinging with cold, and she'd never forget him. The shadow of the 2 arms of the half-circle cliffs fell across her face. The barge was entering the home harbor. She lifted her head high above. She saw I'm sorry. I'm going to have to skip that word. The outline. High above, she saw the outline of a dragon in the sky. How lovely! And how had Brendan Ware known? No, the dragon rider was only doing a routine sweep. With thread falling at unexpected times, dragons were often flying above Half Circle, isolated as it was by the bogs at the top of Nerret Bay. No matter the dragon was swinging above Half Circle Hold at this approximate moment, and that was to Meneley a final tribute to Petteron the harper. The men lifted the heavy oars out of the water, and the barge glided slowly into its mooring at the far end of the dock. Fort and Tillich might boast of being the oldest sea holds, but the only Half Circle had a cavern big enough to dock the entire fishing fleet and keep it safe from threadfall and wet weather. Dock Cavern had moorings for over 30 boats, storage space for all the nets, traps, and lines, airing racks for sail, and shallow lodge for where hulls could be scraped free of sea growths and repaired. At the very end of the immense cavern was a shelf of rock where the hold's builders worked when there was sufficient timber for new hull. Beyond was the small inner cave where the priceless wood was stored, dried on high racks or wrapped into frames. The burial barge lightly touched its pier. Melanie, the first oarsman, held out a hand to her. Startled by the unexpected courtesy to a girl her age, she was about to jump down when she saw in his eye the respect due to her in this moment, and his hand, closing on hers, gave silent approval for her singing of the harper's elegy. The other men stood too, waiting for her to disembark first. She straightened her shoulders, although her throat felt tight enough for more tears, and she stepped proudly down to the solid stone. As she turned to walk back to the land side of the cavern, she saw that the other boats were discharging their passengers quickly and quietly. Her father's boat, the biggest of the Half Circle fleet, had already tacked back into the harbor. Yanis's voice carried across the water above the incidental sounds of cracking boats and muted voices. "Quickly now, men, we've got good breeze rising and the fish'll be bitin' after 3 days of storm." The oarsmen hurried past her to board their assigned fishing boats, and seeming unfair to Meneley, the patron, after a lifelong's dedication to the Half Circle Hold, was dismissed so quickly from everyone's mind. And yet, life did go on. There were fish to be caught against the winter's hungry months. Fair days during the cold months of the turn were not to be squandered. She quickened her pace. She'd far to go around the rim of the dock cavern, and she was cold. Melanie also wanted to get into the hold before her mother noticed that she didn't have the drum. Waste wasn't tolerated by Mavi any more than idleness by Yarnis. Well, on this occasion, it had been a sad one, and the women and children, and also the men too old to see fish, observed the decorous pace out of the cavern, making smaller groups as they headed towards their own holds in the southern arc of the Half Circle's sheltered palisade. Melanie saw Mavi organizing the children into work groups, with no harper to lead them in the teaching songs and ballads. The children would be kept occupied in the clearing of storm debris from the white sanded beaches. There might be sun in the sky and the dragon rider still circling on his brown, But the wind was frigid, and Melanie began to shiver violently. She wanted to feel the warmth of the fire on the great Hold's kitchen hearth and a cup of hard claw inside her. She heard her sister Sela's voice carrying to her on the breeze. "She's got nothing to do now, Mavi. Why do I have to?" Melanie ducked behind a group of adults, avoiding her mother's searching glance. Trusts Sela to remember that Melanie's no longer had the excuse of nursing the ailing Harper. Ahead of her, one of the old aunts tripped, her querulous voice rising in a cry for help. Melanie sprinted to her side, supporting her and receiving loud protestations of gratitude. "Only for Petaron would I have dragged these old bones out on the sea this morning. Bless the man, rest the man," the old woman went on, clinging with unexpected strength to Melanie. "You're a good child, Melanie, so you are." "It is Melanie, isn't it?" The old woman peered up at her. "Now you just give me a hand up to old uncle, and I'll tell him the whole of it, since he hasn't his legs to leave his bed." So Sela had to supervise the children, and Melanie got to the fire at least long enough to stop shivering. Then the old auntie would have it that the uncle would be grateful for some claw too. So when Mavi entered her kitchen, her eyes searching for her youngest daughter, she found Melanie dutifully occupied serving the oldster. "Very well then, Melanie. While you're up there, see you set the old man comfortably. Then you can start on the glows." Melanie had her warming cup with the old uncle and left him comfortable, mournfully exchanging tales for other broodals with the aunt. Checking the glows had been her task ever since she'd grown taller than Sela. It had meant climbing up and down the different levels to the inner and outer layers of the huge sea hold. But Melanie had established the quickest way to finish the job so that she could have some free time to herself before Mavi would started looking for her. She had been accustomed to spending these earned minutes practicing with the harper, so Melanie was not surprised to find herself eventually outside Penryn's door. She was surprised, however, to hear voices in his room. She was about to change angrily through the half-open door and demand an accounting when she heard her mother's voice clearly. "The room won't need much fixing for the new harper, so it won't." Melanie stepped back into the shadows of the corridor. "The new harper?" "What I want to know, Mavi, is who is going to keep the children up in their learning until he comes." The voice was Surreal's, the wife of the first holder, and therefore spokeswoman for the other hold women, as Mavi, a sea holder's lady. "She did well enough this morning. You have to give her that, Mavi." "Yarnis will send the message ship." "Not today nor tomorrow he won't. I don't fault Sea Holder Mavi, but it stands to reason that the boats must fish and the slop's crew can't be spared. That means 5 days before the messenger gets to Egan Hold. From Egan Hold, even if a dragon rider obliges by carrying the message. But we all know that the old timers at Eganware are like to say, so let's say. Harper drums to the Master Harper Hall at Fort is another 2-3 days. A man has to be selected by Master Harper Robinson and sent overland and by ship, and with the thread falling any time it pleases, No one travels fast or far in a day. It'll be spring before we see another Harper. Are the children to be left without teaching for months? Sorrel had punctuated her comments with a brushing sound, and there were other clatters in the room, the swishing of bed rushes being gathered up. Now Melanie could hear the murmur of the two other voices supporting Sorrel's arguments. Petteron has taught well. He taught her well. He taught her well, too, Sorrel interrupted Mavie. Harpering is a man's occupation. Fair enough if sea holders'll spare a man for it. Sorrel's voice was almost belligerent, because everyone knew the answer to that. Truth be told, I think the girls knew the sagas better than the old men at this past turn. You know his mind was ranging back in time, Mavie. Yarnus will do what's proper. The finality in Mavie's tone firmly ended that discussion. Melanie heard footsteps crossing the old Harper's room, and she ducked down the hall, around the nearest bend, and down into the kitchen level. It distressed Melanie to think of anyone, even another Harper, in Petteron's room. Obviously, it distressed others that there was no Harper. Usually such a problem didn't arise. Every hold could boast one or two musically able men, and every hold took pride in encouraging these talents. Harpers like to have other instrumentalists to share the chore of entertaining their holds during the long winter evenings, and it was also the better part of wisdom to have a substitute available for just such an emergency as Half Circle was experiencing. But fishing was hard on the hands, and heavy work, the cold water, the salt and fish oils, thickened joints and calloused fingers in the wrong places. Fishermen were often away many days on longer hauls. After a turn or two at net, trap, and sail lines, young men lost their skill at playing anything but simple tunes. Harper teaching ballads required daft, quick fingers and constant practice. By putting this to sea to finish so quickly after the old Harper's burial, Yarnus thought to have time enough to deal with an alternative solution, and there was no doubt that the girl could sing well, play well, and she'd not disgrace Hold or Harper that morning. It was going to take time to send for and receive a new Harper, and the youngsters must not lose all progress in the learning of the basic teaching ballads. But Giannis had many strong reservations about putting such a heavy responsibility on the shoulders of a girl not 15 turns old. Not the least of these was Melanie's distressing tendency towards tune making. Well enough and amusing now and again in the long winter evenings to hear her sing them, but old Petteron had been alive to keep her to rights. Yanis wasn't sure that he could trust her not to include her trivial little whistles in her lessons. How were the young to know that hers weren't proper songs for their learnings? The trouble was, her melodies were the sort that stayed in the mind, so a man found himself humming or whistling them without meaning to. By the time the boats had profitably traveled the deep and tacked for home, Yanis had found no compromise. It was no consolation to know that he wouldn't have any argument from the other holders. Had Melanie sung poorly that morning? But she hadn't. As sea holder for Half Circle, he was obliged to bring up the young of the hold in the traditions of Pern, knowing their duty and how to do it. He counted himself lucky to be beholden to Brendan Ware, to have Flower Braun Manamith's rider as Ware leader and Lessa as Ramth's Ware woman. So Yanis felt deeply obligated to keep the traditions at Half Circle, and the young would learn what they needed to know, even if a girl had to do the teaching. That evening, after the day's catch had been salted down, he instructed Mavi to bring her daughter to the small room of the great hall where he conducted whole business and where the records were stored. Mavi had put the harper's instruments on the mantel for safekeeping. Appropriately, Yarnis had handed Melanie Petron's guitar. She took the instrument in a properly reverential manner, which reassured Yarnis that she appreciated the responsibility. Tomorrow you'll be excused from your regular morning duties to take the youngsters for their teaching, he told her, but I'll have no more of those finger twiddlings of yours. I sang my songs when Petteron was alive, and you never minded then. Yarnis frowned down at his tall daughter. Petteron was alive. He's dead now, and you'll obey me in this. Over her father's shoulder, Menely saw her mother's frowning face, saw her warning head shake, and held back a quick reply. You bear in mind what I've said, and Yarnis fingered his wide belt he wore. No tuning. Yes, Yanis. Starting tomorrow, then, unless, of course, there's threadfall, and then everyone will bait long lines. Yarnis dismissed the two women and began to compose a message to the Master Harper to go when he could next spare the Slop's crew. They'd sailed to Ingan Hold, and about time Half Circle had some news of the rest of Pern anyway, and he could ship some smoked fish. The journey didn't need to be a wasted trip. Once in the hall, Mavi gripped her daughter's arm hard. Don't disobey him, girl. There's no harm in my tunes, Mother. You know what Petteron said. I'll remind you that the old man's dead, and that that changes everything that went on during his life. Behave yourself while you stand in a man's place. No tuning. To bed now, and mind you turn the glow baskets. No sense wasting light, no eye needs. And that is the end of chapter 1. I want to thank everybody for listening to me chat. Sounds like Melanie, she loves her music. She wants to sing, she wants to play, and she wants to be accepted for who she is. I know it's difficult to be told that you can't do something or you're not supposed to do something. And it's especially not fair to be told that you can't do something you're good at just because you're a woman. Now, here in our day and age, we've gotten past that for the most part. In most places in the world, women do the same work as men. But there are places in the world where that just isn't happening, and some places where it's going backwards, which is very sad. I hope that everything goes well, that while she's doing the teaching, nothing goes wrong, and we get to see her be happy. But since that was only chapter 1, I have a feeling it's not going to go as well as we hope. So thank you again very much for listening today. I can only record a couple of days a week right now, so I may do 2 or 3 recordings a day. I'm not going to do it today. My voice is a little tired. I haven't done this in a bit. So I'm only going to be releasing every maybe 3rd or 4th day on this one. I'm not going to go back into the every second day routine. It was a lot easier with doing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where the chapters were 2 or 3 pages long. This one was a good 18 pages with the foreword and the first chapter. So, yeah. I may actually decide to get into the first actual book of the Pern series. I think this is a good place to start because it gives you some of the dragon riders, it gives you some of the wereholders, and it's just focusing on one main character. The other ones sort of jump around a little bit. And honestly, this is the first book in this series that I read. So I think starting here is a good place. I've actually only just recently started reading the first book in this series. I think it's Dragonflight, maybe. And I don't know if it should be read in order of release or chronological order, because there's actually a book about the initial first generation on Pern before the thread fell. And hey, honestly, this is a huge series to get into. And I think that if I can get my hands on the books, I will share as much as I can. Well, I want to wish you all a great day, a great evening. I don't know what time it is for you right now. It's just starting to get dark here, but it's still only just a little after 5, so have a great one. I appreciate you sticking with me so far, and please, if you can, give me a like, maybe a subscribe. It really makes me smile. Thanks. Bye-bye.